But after our DuckTales parody, wink wink, my cheek still hurts. Thanks, Melissa.
Oh, you're welcome.
If I did not know the context of that quote.
Oh gosh, Max!
Nice. Anyways, our VGA parody raised a question, not about another group and their work, but about the DuckTales video game, which has gotten a lot of mixed reviews. The 30-year-old gamers who look at it through nostalgic glasses are giving it praise, like myself, but others who compare it directly to modern games panned it as being like too difficult and being a bit dated in terms of gameplay, so it has about a 66% of Metacritic. The question is, since not many video game remakes are met with overwhelmingly positive reviews by critics and sometimes even fans, what's going wrong?
I guess it all depends on how it's executed, really.
Meaning?
Well, like the DuckTales, for example, they basically gave it a bit of a facelift without changing so much.
Right, but that's what I think it was GameStop gave DuckTales Remastered a 4 out of 10 because they panned it for having too dated gameplay.
Oh yeah, people want something more modern these days because everything's dedicated to 3D now. Because hardly anybody these days want to play a 2D platform or anything like that. I mean, the only 2D platforms you can find these days are like indie games.
Right, which is something I was about to bring up, is that, well, I would say there is a market for that kind of games, but when we talk about like indie games, most of them do utilize like the two-dimensional space, but most of them are maybe not necessarily more complex, but more
creative,
innovative with it. Like you got games like Braid or Hotline Miami, all those,
Super Meat Boy,
that too. So I think the spirit of the old game still lives on with the indie scene, but they're still trying to wedge in some innovations or try something more creative, something more innovative with it. So I think I'm not necessarily agreeing with the person, but here's my argument, because me and Matt, we discussed this prior to hitting the record button here, is that, for example, you mentioned the Turtles in Time remake, right? Like I told you earlier, imagine if this was not a remake of the TMNT game. Imagine if it was giant mutant rats versus some weirdo in a metal armor, right? It was released to the XBLA, and it was done it used the same mechanics as the remake, but it did not have the TMNT name attached to it. Would that game fare well in today's market?
That's a good question, because I think that Ninja Turtles Reshelled is a hard one to judge because it was pretty true to the original, and as bad as it sounds, it was almost too true to the original. It made better use of 3D space in the arcade or SNES version, but it also included some problems that there were in the gameplay in the originals, like getting trapped in fights. But it's also a very limited side-scroller beat-em-up. But I'm not sure if it was the outdated gameplay that sunk it, or if it might have been people wearing nostalgic glasses, possibly thinking that maybe it's inferior to the original game. But I wonder if it wasn't the gameplay, because other 2D beat-em-ups like Castle Crashers have been very successful. So I think maybe that the fact that it was a remake of an existing game people had familiarity about contributed to it.
Because the thing about these remakes is that apparently, unlike, say, movie remakes, they are specifically targeted at the the generation that grew up with them, who are now somewhere in their 30s, most likely obese, and have a neck beard.
I'm kidding. I shave.
That's good to know.
Precisely. So it's like, hey kids, remember this? Now you get to. It's like, Matt, what did you say about the DuckTales? How you managed to like relive your childhood while you were playing it?
Well, it's just fun to go back and look and see what they've done with the game. I mean, it's like going back to some place from your childhood and seeing what's changed. It's like, oh wow, this is the dirt hill where I used to ride my mountain bike, and this is where I broke my leg. I remember this place fondly.
Right.
Fondly. Fondly's the word.
I know. But then you come back and see, oh wow, they put a house on it. And then, that changed for better or worse. Same thing with, like, an old school ground. They might have put up a new piece of equipment, and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, how do I put this? there's like good change and then there's the bad change, but it all depends on the person, really, because you're never going to please everybody.
Right.
But it depends on the majority of people you do actually please. If you get like small-handed people who are like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, it's not like this or this or this. And then you got like the bigger handful going, oh, this is actually a lot better. Then, you know, you got some gold there. But if you got like more people hating it and a whole lot less people liking it, then you've done something wrong there. And the point is exactly how do you use the exact same formula, or do you take the formula of that game and you tweak it a little bit to make it better, or do you take the same formula, just leave it as is, and it's basically eating the same stale meal, you know?
Right. Well, my thing is that I always try to picture a new generation of gamers trying to play the original Doom. And they're running through and trying to run and gun, and then they jump behind a wall and they're like, why am I not healing? I have to run out into the line of fire for a health pack? No!
It's too damn hard.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I wonder if modern games aren't coddling new gamers, especially when people complain about DuckTales Remastered being frustratingly difficult. I'm just not talking about NES challenges as in like the impossible shit games that the AVGN reviews, but you know, like a decent challenge where you get 3 strikes and then once you're dead, then the game starts from the beginning, kind of like the classic Ninja Gaiden.
Well, maybe that is happening, but then again, games have also, you know, improved since then. They've changed, not always for the best, as evidenced by most first-person games being homogenized and basically turned into Call of Duty clones. But one thing I just realized is that so far we've been like discussing nostalgic remakes, but there are also, I believe, incessant attempts to like take a 20 or 30-year-old obscure game and like bring it back to life. For example, like Capcom is thinking of remaking Strider. Remember that game for the Genesis? I don't, but I know of it.
Yeah, I remember it for the arcade.
Yeah. So there's that happening, and for
They just got done remaking Leisure Suit Larry.
Yes, that too.
In HD.
Even though that was an indie release funded by Kickstarter, I believe.
Still the same thing.
Yeah. Then earlier this year, we got the announcement that Killer Instinct is returning back.
I am so psyched for that.
The only reason to buy an X-Bone.
Oh gosh, that's right. Dang it!
Yeah, I'm not spending $500 on a new console for one fucking game.
I can buy a new computer for $600.
Then you have Steam! Woohoo!
Yay, the Steam box. I never had Steam in the first place, so...
I couldn't live without Steam, just because I never want to deal with consoles ever again. You see, the thing is that, and this actually applies to what we're talking about, the reason why I like Steam is because almost every game I buy on Steam will work on a brand new computer. With the PlayStation 4, they're already planning on re-releasing PlayStation 3 games in slightly higher definition for the PlayStation 4. I'm not even joking. I mean, they pulled this exact same shit with HD remasters where you can buy a few PlayStation 2 titles in HD for the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox. And now they're immediately saying, oh, buy this 3-year-old game and play it on the PS4.
Uh-huh. I wonder why they did that. Ka-ching!
Yeah, obviously. Like, oh, great, I get to play the same game even though I still have it right here in my hands, but I gotta go out and buy another one, the same game for $50. Woohoo!
Yeah, but this is actually something we discussed not too long ago, because, for example, with film, you have classics that are being constantly preserved and migrated to newer formats.
For example, you take something like The Exorcist movie from the 70s, and, you know, I'm sure it was released in home media, first VHS, then they updated it for the DVD release, and then now you can buy it on Blu-ray. So you have these classics preserved. You don't really see that with video games, because you take something like the original DOS games, like Haunted Mansion or all those classic point-and-click games, right? And there is really no way to legally play them these days outside of using like an emulator. And that is kind of upsetting, because I realize the difference between video games and films, and that video games are essentially software and that you need the proper hardware to play it. But, you know, if these are the classics we're talking about, then you might actually want to try and preserve them, which they don't do. I mean, sometimes in the case of, say, the Monkey Island series, they did like a re-release back in 2010, I think, like an HD re-release.
1 and 2, and they're both awesome.
True, but again, that could be seen as, well, Well, no, I was about to say that like that could be seen as a cash grab, but then again, you could also say that a Blu-ray re-release of The Exorcist can also be considered a cash grab because you already have that on DVD, you know. So maybe that is just that fact of preserving the game. Like, let's update the graphics, let's introduce it to a new generation of gamers. So that's good, but you don't have that for every single game.
Well, Max brings up a good point. And I'll let Melissa talk in just a second because I don't want to hog up all the time like I always do. But movies are always updating formats and offering new editions. And you usually have to end up buying the same copy of your favorite movies from time to time. But every single time they re-release a movie on a new format, they're basically keeping those movies alive. And if The Shining, for instance, was never out on anything else besides VHS, there'd be entire generations who would never be able to see or experience it.
Right.
And video games are the same way. So it really makes sense to re-release and upgrade games to keep preserving them.
Well, you say that they're this is a good way for them to preserve games, but there's a difference between preserving a game and tweaking it so much to where it's not even preserved anymore. It's like totally some difference.
Right, and that would be the remake syndrome, like the needless horror movie remakes. Or the George Lucas syndrome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or even in the case of these remakes, because it's not always the same studio, so it's like if they decided to preserve Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, but instead of, you know, digitally remastering it, they decided to make a remake and like told, I don't know, some hack like M. Night Shyamalan to, you know, helm it. That would be a disaster.
Yes, it would.
I mean, not all of these remakes are really that successful. I mean, like, you mentioned the Leisure Suit Larry, but that was actually made by the creator of the original series, I believe.
Right, that's true.
So it's more of like a, I don't know, I guess a passion project for him. Or it's like, you know, to introduce a new generation of gamers to the game, or to cater to the old fans of the series. Like, you know, I'm bringing it to the HD era or something like that.
Right, like pretend if Kubrick was still alive and he got a chance to digitally remaster 2001 Space Odyssey, you know, improve the image quality for Blu-ray and to give it like uncompressed audio and remaster it to be the definitive version of that movie ever. There's a big difference between remastering your work to keep it alive to be able to introduce it to a younger demographic. Horrible example for Leisure Suit Larry, but to keep it in the public consciousness so that it's never forgotten. But it's a different matter to have trivial remakes and touches and whatnot by people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, you know, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake and the Friday the 13th remake, and the list goes on and on.
Those were terrible.
Right.
But to get back to video games,
Yes.
what if there's the idea that id Software would remake the original Doom, not in 3D, but, you know, high HD sprites and increase the frame rate and give it some gentle special effects like some lighting, but, you know, keep the core arcade feeling and stay true to the original Doom. I wonder how that'd fare.
I'm having a hard time imagining that.
Well, there's actually a free project out there. I think it's called Brutal Doom. But take the example of Leisure Suit Larry and the Monkey Island games. They're almost identical to the core gameplay, but then they're given, you know, an upgraded look. They're given voice actors. They're really brought into the modern gaming scene because games have changed rapidly, faster than movies, I'd even say. It's like them saying, hey, there's this great game from way back when that we made, and instead of giving us like an outdated 8-bit version, which would probably get universally panned, they upgraded it for the masses. They gave it a great new look and made it much more marketable.
Well, here's the reason why I'm actually a part of this discussion, other than the fact to demean Melissa even more.
Aw. Gosh dang, I'm trying here.
We're joking with you. Joking with you.
Right, I mean, come on. A man and a woman leading a discussion, equality, what the hell are you talking about? You're the token minority here.
I'm actually on Melissa's side for the most part.
Yeah.
Even though she hit me. In my avatar, I want to have that black eye and a missing tooth.
Every time I raise my arm, he flinches.
And see, unlike Rihanna, he doesn't go to Twitter and complain.
Oh, nice.
All of those abused women should follow my example. I'm joking. I'm totally joking.
Please don't set our
so
studio on fire.
Yeah, it's already a fire hazard as it is, you know.
Uh-huh.
Broken pallets, mounds of garbage, some dead hookers.
But anyway, the reason why I'm here is that unlike these two senior citizens here, I did not grow up with the video games. I did not grow up playing like DuckTales and whatnot. Hey, what do you expect from me? I'm a greenhorn. But anywho, another thing is that when discussing these nostalgic remakes, is that I do believe that they have a right to exist, is because of the aforementioned fucked up situation with availability of video games, where if I wanted to, I could not legally go and obtain like the classic copy of something like Monkey Island, right? But in regards to like the criticisms or the negative reviews that DuckTales received, I don't think I can really fault the player for, I mean the critic or the reviewer for that, because it's just the guy's opinion and hey, he is entitled to it. But I don't know, if it's a remake to preserve the game, then I wholeheartedly approve of it. But I can also understand if some people if like there's a new generation of people who are interested in video games and they're just not particularly into that kind of stuff. Because, for example, if it's someone who enjoys video games but does not like DuckTales for its outdated mechanics, fair enough. But if it's someone who's like an avid Call of Duty player and he really sucks at the original Doom, then that's just like... if we were to draw a parallel with films, that would be someone who's like the biggest Michael Bay fan ever dissing Citizen Kane, in which case, you know... Yeah, precisely. But here's the thing. Speaking from experience, I can appreciate what they're doing here, and I realize that they're basically kind of preaching with to the choir here, because they have a niche audience and they appeal to that niche, and that is understandable. That is great. But I can also understand people who are not really that interested in it, because like prior to this discussion, we sort of tried to find parallels with something like cinema, if there are really that kind of like nostalgic remakes.
And the only two examples we really managed to unearth were something like the Expendables series and the 2012 remake of the Three Stooges. And even then, in the case of something like the Expendables, it's more of a spiritual successor, I guess, to all those 80s action movies, versus a direct remake or reimagining or whatever.
Anyway, but the thing about that kind of remakes is that they can also be detrimental in that, for example, you take like the Three Stooges movie, right? And in the back of my mind, I can hear some Hollywood executive justifying that remake by saying like, you know, oh, we're trying to introduce the Three Stooges to a new audience, you know, it's the modernized Three Stooges. And here's the thing, that doesn't really make me want to watch the movie anymore, because for example, I myself, I'm not a huge fan of the Three Stooges. I'm not saying they're terrible, it's just that I don't really care much for slapstick comedy. But
Boo.
Oh yeah, people wouldn't like you for that.
I mean,
Maybe they don't like you anyways, but I'm kidding, Max, please continue.
Hey, Melissa's finally getting to the groove of CCS. Awesome.
Woo!
Anyway, so I'm not saying the kind of humor I employ is more highbrow, but you know, it's just not my kind of thing. But here's my point: if I were to display interest in the Three Stooges one day and said, you know what, I just wanna see what it's about, I just wanna watch the movies and see if it's my kind of thing, then I would go straight to the original, right? I would not bother with the remake, because here's how it would work. If I were interested in the Three Stooges, I would go and I would watch the originals, because those are the originals in their unaltered form. And if I liked them enough and I became a fan, then I may go ahead and check out the remake. And the same thing with video games. For example, like about a year ago or so, I got interested in the Castlevania series, and I actually went and played the original Castlevania game. Not one of those modern remakes or reimaginings for like the DS or the 3DS or whatever, but no. So I went ahead and I played the original game. I liked it a lot, but that's just an instance of me actually taking an interest in what you could refer to as a classical game from the NES era, and I did not really bother with the remakes. I mean, I think I tried one for like the Wii U Virtual Console they made, like it's called Castlevania Adventure X or something, but regardless, my point is, if someone is interested in, for example, playing the DuckTales game, I think they would they would most likely go and play the original one, because again, even when playing the remake, you still need to kind of put yourself in the mentality or in the mindset that this is an NES game from 20 years ago. And apparently some people were unable to do that, and that's why the game received negative reviews, and people complained that the mechanics were outdated, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. So, where the hell am I going with this? So you can't really fault people for not, say, taking a particular interest, because it does kind of, reek of exploitation when you say, like, oh, this is the DuckTales for the new generation. I'm not saying they do that, because what I'm seeing with these remakes, it's more of like a passion project, a love letter to the original game. It's like, let's preserve it, which I can understand. But there must be some examples of, like, exploitation of famous game franchises where they sort of, like, ostensibly bring it back to introduce it to a new generation of gamers, but then they fuck it up royally.
The original Silent Hill games are kind of exploitation. I mean, I just think that releasing the PlayStation 2 versions on the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox, I mean, while you can kind of count it as preserving it, it's still kind of... It's still, well, yeah, it's buggy, but it also kind of reeks of an easy money grab,
Right, I mean, it's just one generation ago. I mean, backwards compatibility, what's that?
Right, I mean, it'd be different if they took, like, the original Spyro the Dragon or something, or the original Silent Hill, and remade it, same gameplay, same,
Same contents and whatnot.
Same content, basically, just updated the graphics on it. That constitute, a full-out redo, whereas all they did here was they just took the game, upscaled it, and then put it back on a disc, which you can take the PlayStation 2 game and run it through an emulator on your computer, as long as your computer's decent, and get the exact same effect. I mean, they've literally sold you the exact same game twice, because the resolution in a PlayStation 2 game is capable technically of HD graphics. The textures might be pretty low, but you can still get the high res models and stuff out of it. You could even do the same thing with PlayStation 1 games. Anything that's 3D rendered, the textures will still be low res, but you can still get a sharper picture.
Huh.
I'm not joking. I got an article on CCS plug kind of detailing the same thing. I mean, that's what they did at the God of War quote remakes. Is all they did is they upscaled the graphics from standard television resolution to 720 or 1080, which a computer can do with the same fucking PlayStation 2 disc. No joke.
Well, I guess it really, like Melissa said earlier, it really depends on how the remake feels, I guess, because if it's faithful to the original, but with just updated graphics, fair enough. Even though, once again, I'm trying to think of like a movie parallel here, and one example I can think of is like the HD re-release of the original Ghost in the Shell film, like Ghost in the Shell 2.0, where most of the changes were really just unnecessary. Just let's add CGI graphics and let's make the image a little bit dimmer.
George Lucas did.
Yes, and then the thing about the original Ghost in the Shell film is that the animation is so beautiful that it still looks gorgeous today. So it was really largely unnecessary.
Yep.
They're trying to fix something that wasn't broken.
Yeah, well, they're not even fixing it. They're just kind of like giving it a facelift, which...
Even though it's already pretty.
Yeah, it's like here's a good example. The Wind Waker HD remake.
The remaking.
They have already what rock do you live under?
I'm in Utah! News is slow
that's
over
it.
here.
That explains it.
That explains everything. Sorry, miss.
That's my accent, Max.
Oh.
Yeah, stop taking other people's accent. Gosh dang it.
It's because Melissa's accent's more like, ding dong, hello, my name is Brother Price, and I would like to share with you a most amazing book. Sorry, Book of Mormon joke.
Okay, Wind Waker HD. The original game still looks gorgeous due to its cel shaded look, and if there's one game I would never have thought that they would decide to re-release, that would be like Wind Waker. It's like Ocarina of Time, maybe they'll kind of... Oh, wait, hold on. They did re-release Ocarina of Time as well for the 3DS.
Mm-hmm. In 3D.
Why do people give Nintendo a pass again?
Cha-ching!
Same reason why we give a passing for the Tales of Monkey Island games. Technically, I mean, it falls into that area where it's like half greed and half preserving.
Right, but in the case of Wind Waker, they didn't even like change much. They just added more bloom and added a revolutionary feature that, okay, here's the thing, because rumor has it that, or rather it's not rumor, it's fact, that the original Wind Waker game was meant to be longer, because Shigeru Miyamoto was concerned that lots of gamers would not finish it because there were reports that some people never finished Ocarina of Time, so he basically cut several dungeons out of it. So lots of people were expecting the remake to feature those dungeons, like, yes, add more dungeons, add more content. Instead, what did they add? A perfunctory gimmick where you can send bottle messages to other players, so hey, even more drawn dicks.
Yay!
It's like they have a fetish.
Max, this is where you get into the hypocrisy of it, because that's exactly what George Lucas did. Is he released found footage type things. He expanded Star Wars and he made it bigger and grander than it was. And we lambast George Lucas all the time for doing that because the original movies are great.
Well, I'm not supporting it. Oh, I see what you did.
We
there.
need
Yeah.
more for walkers in the background.
Right. I mean,
There's a difference between a movie and a game, because a game is interactive, so more content means more film. Whereas what George did was he added more walkers in the background.
Right. But what I'm saying is that why is it okay for movies to not include extra footage, and for games to have extra footage, like in the case of Wind Waker? Because I mean, they've re-released a game that almost everybody knows, and this content that was basically on the editor's cutting room floor, they didn't add it, and that's why we're all angry. You know, they can add more dungeons to this game, and instead they re-released it as it is. Whereas if George Lucas released yet another change or another Star Wars
Re-release,
and it had even more CGI and more questionable additions, we'd be lampooning it right now. I think what it all kind of boils down to is we want the original content, but if it gets a facelift without interrupting that content, like Monkey Island and Leisure Suit Larry and DuckTales, for instance, then you still get to experience the exact same thing that you did previously. It's just that the changes are not, I don't want to say it's noticeable, but they don't have the same jarring impact as like, oh, a new scene in a movie or a new level in a game. It just depends on whether or not something is a loving homage to the original, or if it's just, a director wanking off.
right?
Yeah. Well, the other question is the demand high for it?
That too.
Like, do people want to see this, or is it fine as is? Because if it's fine as is, then just leave it as is, But they don't.
Right, because that's why there's no Doom remake on Steam or something. I mean, it's just they release a classic game because that's what people know and that's what they expect. But then, of course, they have the Monkey Island remake, which oddly enough gave you the original version and the updated version, so you could play which one you wanted, which I thought was cool.
Right. That's just them trying to preserve like the original game and the HD remake for people who basically are graphic whores who care about, it has to be HD, the sound has to be HD, Dolby Surround, Dolby 5.1.
Gotta look pretty.
Hey, I like the Monkey Island remake. Those are fun.
I'm not lambasting the re-releases. I'm just saying that some people
do judge something on face value. That's correct. I mean, like, all in all, the DuckTales game I thought it was a loving remake. I mean, the voice actors came back and they updated the music a little bit, and the graphic artists from the cartoon came back to do all the amazing backgrounds, and the sprites were hand animated, and it's a great game on top of a great remake, new coat of paint, etc., over top of an already good game from my childhood. But again, I'm looking at it from nostalgic eyes, whereas a couple of reviewers may not have the same experience. I had the beholder, people. I had the beholder.
See, when it comes to remakes, I believe Mark Kermode put it best. The best film, or in this case, video game, to remake is the one that you enjoyed overall, but felt like it had a couple of flaws that you could personally improve. Because that way, you're creating a superior version of said film or video game for both yourself and the audience.
That's actually pretty spot on. The worst remakes are always the pointless ones, and the worst revisions are always the ones that change almost nothing of meaning. So do many of the old horror movies need a modern reboot so that, you know, Carrie can have a cell phone? Do we need George Lucas to keep making ridiculous changes to the original Star Wars trilogy like blinking Ewoks?
No, of course not. Not any more than we need freaking bottle messages in Wind Waker.
But I mean, the theory still holds true for video games. Ninja Turtles Reshelled, for instance, got panned because there were problems from the arcade version that got carried over to the remake, which is freaking stupid. And then, of course, they lost the entire 1980s cartoon vibe with the 3D models and stuff, which kind of pissed a couple people off. The opposite's true with DuckTales. They completely went with the 80s look, and they even got the voice actors back, the artists back, and made it all look like a freaking cartoon. And of course, they improved on the fact that the original game didn't have a storyline, so they added this overarching story plot to help, you know, tie it all together and to basically improve where the game needed improved.
So basically, our point is, do have respect for the elders, for the classics, and please, if you're a hack writer or a hack game designer or whatever, please don't go digging graves and partaking in necrophilia just to make a quick buck.
Yeah, we don't want to see that. Thank you.
If you want to deliver a eulogy, do that. Just don't fuck the corpse.
Okay, fine.
What? We're gonna do it? I already got the candles and the rose petals. Oh well, and the shovel.
Way to go, Ed Gein. Hey, thanks for watching. We've taken a little bit of time off the CCS podcast, but there's some awesome stuff in the works, including a new written articles on the site by almost all the members, and hell, we're even getting a brand new website in December with loads of fresh content. In addition to our current shows, we're also planning on branching out into some additional creative storytelling territory, so stay tuned to Cheshire Cat Studios and follow us on the NSA, the Facebook. Yeah, that's it. Shit, I'm gonna get another knock on the door.